They thought I was chasing him. The girl who clung too tight. Who didn't know when to let go. But I wasn't chasing him. I was chasing the version of myself I lost while loving him. They didn't see the blueprints in my hands. They saw the heartbreak in my eyes. They whispered behind screens. Still hung up on him? Poor Olivia. But the truth was never that small. He walked out, sure. But when the door shut, I finally heard the silence. And in that silence, I started listening to me. My name is Olivia Brooks. I'm 29. And I live in Austin, Texas. They thought I was breaking down. I was breaking ground. I was supposed to be the polished girl with the clear plan. The one who made it look easy. Daughter of a dentist and a high school principal. Oldest of 3. The responsible one. I was the girl who color-coded her calendar, volunteered at shelters, got a scholarship to UT Austin, and graduated early with a degree in public health. Everyone thought I'd be working at the CDC by now, or at least married to someone who was. I used to think so too. My life was a timeline, and I was determined to never fall behind. Every checkbox was a step closer to the version of success my parents could brag about in church bulletins and dinner parties. And then came Marcus. He walked into my life like he already belonged there, cool, ambitious, confident in a way I wasn't. He was a tech entrepreneur, already raising his second round of funding for a healthcare platform. The kind of man people introduced with pride. The kind who made your parents lean in and nod. We met at a local startup networking event, and before I knew it, he had my number and my future penciled in. I didn't fall for him all at once. I fell in stages, little ones. The way he remembered my coffee order, the softness in his voice when he talked about his grandmother, how he'd look at me like I was the only calm thing in his storm of ambition. I felt seen. Important. Like I had finally found someone moving forward at my pace. But slowly, almost imperceptibly, my path stopped being mine. I took a step back from my job at the nonprofit to help Marcus with investor decks. Then, I paused my grad school application to support his product launch. At first, it felt like partnership, teamwork. But in hindsight, I was disappearing piece by piece, mistaking sacrifice for loyalty. My friends started asking questions. Are you still applying this fall? Do you even like consulting? You sure this is what you want? And I would smile, say, it's just a phase. But inside, I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Marcus was everywhere, on podcasts, panels, press articles. And I was behind the scenes editing copy, fixing bugs, organizing investor lists, setting up meetings. He'd say, couldn't have done it without Liv. But no one ever looked at me twice. At the launch party for his Series B round, I stood in the corner, wearing a dress I bought for his success. People toasted to his genius, while I collected empty glasses and smiled like I belonged. A week later, I found a hotel receipt in his car glove box. Out of state. 2 nights. He said it was just business. I didn't ask again. I didn't cry. Not then. I was too tired to cry. It had been months since I'd done something for myself. I couldn't even remember the last time I wrote in my journal or went for a walk without answering a Slack message. I had become a satellite orbiting someone else's sun. And then he left. No explanation. Just a note that said, I think we're heading in different directions. You deserve more. The irony? He was right. The breakup made it official. But I had already been lost long before he walked out. The only difference now was I had no one to hide behind. I wasn't the girl behind the genius anymore. I wasn't anyone. People whispered. Poor Olivia. She gave up everything for him. Wasn't she supposed to go to grad school? I thought they were getting married. My parents didn't say much. My mom just said, well, it happens. You'll figure something out. My dad didn't even make eye contact at dinner for weeks. I caught him telling my cousin, she's taking some time off. No one said it to my face, but I knew what they thought. I had chased a man, lost myself, and had nothing to show for it. And maybe that was true, at least from the outside. I stayed in my apartment for weeks. Deleted Instagram. Blocked his number. Didn't answer when friends called. I couldn't bear the sound of concern, the tone that said, you poor thing. I remember sitting on my kitchen floor, eating cereal with no milk, wearing the same hoodie 3 days straight. The silence was so loud. No Slack pings. No calendar alerts. No one needing anything from me. It should have felt like freedom. It felt like failure. But something strange started to happen inside that silence. A tiny voice, barely there. It said, "What if this is where you begin?" I didn't believe it, not yet. But I listened. One night, I opened my laptop. Not to check emails. Not to look up jobs. Just to write. I started typing a list of everything I loved as a kid, designing little journals, making earrings out of wire, watching women in documentaries start businesses from nothing. I didn't know it then, but that list would become a map. No one was watching me rebuild. No one even knew I'd started. Because while they were still pitying the girl who lost the guy, I was quietly laying the bricks of something no one could take away again. It started with clay. I was walking past a tiny shop tucked between a laundromat and a taqueria on East 7th Street, someplace I'd passed 100 times and never entered. But that day, something made me stop. Maybe it was the way the afternoon sun hit the window display, catching the shimmer of tiny ceramic bowls and oddly shaped earrings. Maybe it was the silence inside me begging to be filled with something tactile, something real. Inside, the air smelled like dust and lavender. The shopkeeper, a woman in her 60s with silver braids and kind eyes, looked up from a tray of beads. "Feel free to touch anything," she said. "We're all broken somewhere. Clay helps." I bought a $7 starter kit and a small set of tools. I didn't even know what I planned to make. I just wanted something to mold, something that would take shape under my hands. At home, I spread out the tools on my kitchen table. The same table where I once stayed up rewriting Marcus's pitch decks. That night, I pushed clay instead of words. I didn't have a plan. I just rolled and coiled and shaped until my fingers hurt and my shoulders finally dropped from their usual knot. The first thing I made was hideous, a lopsided dish that cracked on one side. But I kept it. The next day, I made another. And another. The routine didn't feel productive in the way I was used to. There were no metrics to hit, no launch dates, no one clapping at the end. Just me. Just clay. Just music low in the background, and the soft scrape of tools against potential. I started going back to that shop. The owner's name was Maya. She hosted free drop-in sessions on Thursdays for anyone wanting to sculpt or bead, or even just talk. Most of the people there were older, retired women, local artists, a few college students. No one asked what I used to do. No one cared. They just passed me colors and complimented my work, even when it looked like beginner garbage. One afternoon, an older woman named Marjorie sat next to me. Her hands were wrinkled but steady as she painted tiny flowers on a ceramic tile. "This machine hates me," she muttered, pointing to her old flip phone, frustrated. I smiled and took it from her gently. "Want me to help?" 15 minutes later, I'd helped her access her messages, update her contacts, and even set a shortcut to call her daughter. Marjorie looked at me like I'd handed her magic. "You brought my baby into my living room," she said softly. She moved to Seattle last year. I couldn't even call her without messing it up. That sentence stayed with me. "You brought my baby into my living room." I walked home in a daze, her words replaying over and over in my head. I wasn't just shaping clay anymore. I was shaping connection. Trust. Joy. That night, I opened a fresh Google Doc and titled it Ideas That Matter. Item number 1. Simple tech help for seniors. Item number 2. Handmade jewelry that tells a story. Item number 3. Don't build to impress. Build to heal. The more I spent time at Maya's studio, the more I remembered the parts of me I had buried. I used to love creating, not for approval, not for applause, but because it made me feel alive. Somewhere between grad school applications and Marcus's startup parties, I'd convinced myself that anything without a salary or scale wasn't real. But this was real. The way people lit up when something worked. The way their eyes softened when someone listened. So I kept going. I used what I knew: organization, structure, design. I created small tutorials and printouts for seniors. How to send a voice note, how to save photos, how to block spam calls. "Maya, let me pin them on the studio wall." Then she asked if I'd teach a class. Just 4 people. It wasn't much. But to me, it felt like the Super Bowl. I spent days creating laminated instruction cards, testing different phones, learning what questions people asked most. When Thursday came, the class showed up, 2 grandmothers, 1 retiree, and a man named Charlie who'd just moved in with his daughter after a mild stroke. Charlie couldn't remember his passwords. He was frustrated and embarrassed. By the end of class, we created a simple system for his logins, taught him how to FaceTime, and set up reminders for his meds. He teared up when he called his sister, whom he hadn't seen in 2 years. She thought I forgot her, he whispered. I went home that night with $40 in cash and a bag of cookies someone had baked as thanks. I felt rich in a way I couldn't explain. The next few weeks were a blur of quiet momentum. Word spread. More people came. I didn't advertise, just printed flyers and left them at the grocery store, the community center, and the clinic down the street. By month 2, I was teaching 2 sessions a week, 1 tech, 1 jewelry making. The classes were small, but each one filled with laughter, shared grief, tiny triumphs. People began telling me their stories. Widows reconnecting with family, veterans learning to email, women in their 60s who had never made something with their hands before. I wasn't making headlines. I wasn't making 6 figures. But I was making something. And every piece of clay I molded, every lesson I taught, every smile I sparked, was a brick in the foundation of a self I was finally proud to know. It was slow. It was quiet. It was mine. By spring, things had started to move faster. The tech classes that began with 4 curious attendees were now drawing 20. I had to rent a small side room at the local library to accommodate everyone. The flyer had evolved from something I photocopied at FedEx to a sleek, branded poster with the name "Click Kind" across the top. Maya helped me design the logo, soft blue text with a warm, curved cursor symbol that looked like a heart. It still didn't feel like a business. I wasn't trying to make money. I was trying to fill a gap I saw with my own 2 eyes. But little by little, Click Kind took shape. The library offered me a small stipend. Then the local councilwoman reached out about doing workshops at community centers. A local hospice organization asked if I'd create custom tech guides for their patients' families. I partnered with a retired nurse to co-host a workshop on using apps for medication reminders and digital journaling. I learned how to write proposals, track RSVPs, manage feedback forms. I hired a freelance web designer on Fiverr to build me a clean landing page. The email list crossed 1,000 subscribers within 6 months, mostly seniors, their children, and support workers. My little laminated handouts became a downloadable resource pack called Digital Basics for Real Life. One evening, I opened my inbox to find a message with a subject line, "Your resources saved my mom." Inside was a 3-paragraph note from a woman in San Diego. Her mother had been isolated, struggling with depression. After attending one of my virtual workshops, she reconnected with her old piano teacher in Nebraska over Zoom. It gave her a reason to get out of bed. It gave her back her voice. The daughter wrote, "Thank you for building something that sees people like her." I read it 3 times. I cried the 3rd. Still, not everyone saw it. Especially not the people I once longed to impress. At a family barbecue, my cousin Brian asked if I had gone back to work yet. I told him gently, "I've been working for myself. I run tech empowerment workshops for older adults." He raised an eyebrow, sipped his beer. "Oh, so like teaching old folks to click buttons? Real noble work." He meant it as a joke, but it landed like a slap. Later, my aunt leaned over with a pitying smile. "You've always been the free spirit. Not everyone needs a career, right?" I wanted to scream, "It is a career." I wanted to list the partnerships, the user growth, the testimonials, the waitlist for workshops in 3 counties. Instead, I smiled. That's the thing about rebuilding quietly. No one hears the hammer strikes but you. When I launched the Click Kind online resource hub, we had 1,200 monthly users within the first 8 weeks. 78% email open rate. Higher than some Fortune 500 companies. But when I shared the link in the family group chat, only Maya from the studio replied, "So proud of you, Liv. Keep going." I attended a local innovation summit. They gave me 5 minutes to speak on tech for underserved communities. When I stepped off stage, a man from a veterans organization shook my hand and said, "You have no idea how needed this is." He asked me to come speak at their next roundtable. I told my dad over dinner that weekend. He nodded slowly, without much interest. "Still doing that tech thing?" I nodded back. "Yes. It's growing." He cut his steak. "You ever think about going back for your MPH?" I didn't answer. Not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. I had finally stopped needing their recognition to know I was doing something valuable. Success is a strange thing when it doesn't look how people expected. They don't know how to measure it. They squint at it, try to reshape it into a box they understand. If you're not in an office or on a corporate track, they assume you're drifting. But I wasn't drifting. I was anchoring. My days were full. My inbox was fuller. I ran pilot programs with senior centers across 3 cities. I collaborated with a high school coding club to build a simplified tablet interface for older users. I applied for a small grant and won $10,000 for materials, outreach, and developing digital tools. When the check came in the mail, I sat down on the floor and just stared at it. Not because of the money, but because of what it symbolized. That someone finally believed in the thing I had built. And not because I cried in front of them. Not because they owed me, but because it worked. Still, family gatherings were hard. At one dinner, someone brought up Marcus. Apparently, he was featured in a Forbes 30 Under 30 piece about social impact startups. Everyone turned to me like I was supposed to say something. I shrugged and said, "Good for him." They didn't know that I'd seen the article weeks ago. That I read it, smiled, and closed the tab. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. Not anymore. They didn't know I had already passed the metrics that used to define him in my mind. Not in dollars, but in meaning. My phone buzzed during dessert. A message from Marjorie's daughter. "Thank you for helping my mom. She's more independent than she's been in years. She even taught me how to use Do Not Disturb mode." I locked my screen, excused myself, and stood outside watching the sky. It was pink with hints of gold, like a quiet kind of celebration. They still didn't see me, but I had finally stopped asking to be seen. It happened quietly, the way most real revolutions do. There was no dramatic announcement, no viral post or bold confrontation. Just a new Olivia walking into old rooms and not shrinking this time. The first person to truly notice was Ava. She and I had worked at the same firm for 5 years. Back when I was still with Ethan, she'd seen me cry in the bathroom at least half a dozen times. She'd once lent me concealer to cover the mascara-streaked lines down my cheeks after a lunch break text from him. But now, I walked into the Monday morning staff meeting with a confidence I hadn't even rehearsed. It was just there, rising naturally from the foundation I had laid, brick by brick. "You look different," she said, her voice caught somewhere between admiration and curiosity. "I am," I smiled. There was no arrogance in my tone, just truth. The version of me that had once needed Ethan's attention to feel valuable no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who had learned to validate herself, and not just emotionally, but financially, mentally, spiritually. My business had started to thrive. The branding consultancy I launched from my spare room had picked up speed in ways I hadn't anticipated. Word of mouth from local entrepreneurs, coupled with a viral Instagram reel I'd accidentally posted during a caffeine rush, led to more clients than I could handle alone. I'd brought on a part-time assistant, Janelle, who was as excited about the mission as I was. I wasn't just building income. I was building impact. People began to whisper again. But this time, the tone had shifted. "She's killing it. Did you see Olivia's campaign for that bookstore? I heard she's doing branding for the mayor's office now." Funny how the same voices that once pitted me were now curious. Hungry even. And then there was Ethan. He texted me one evening, months after our last encounter. The message was brief, but sharp enough to draw blood. "You look incredible. I've been watching your work. Proud of you. Would love to catch up sometime." My hands didn't shake as I read it. The old Olivia might have stared at that message for hours, crafting the perfect response. Something coy or forgiving. Something that might reopen the door just a little, just enough to feel wanted again. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I stared at the text for a few seconds, smiled softly, and deleted it. No anger. No revenge. Just clarity. Ethan wasn't my enemy. He was simply a reflection of who I used to be, of what I used to believe I needed. He thought I had been chasing him, and maybe, at some point I had. But now? Now I was building platforms, mentoring interns, hosting workshops for women who had been told they were too emotional or too dramatic for leadership. I was waking up before the sun not because I had anxiety, but because I had purpose. And the ones who used to mock me, they didn't laugh anymore. One day, while giving a TEDx talk titled Rebuilding from Rock Bottom, The Power of Starting Alone, I scanned the audience and caught sight of familiar faces. Former coworkers. Even one of Ethan's old friends, seated near the front, eyes wide, absorbing every word. In that moment, the irony struck me like a lightning bolt of peace. They thought I was chasing a man, but I was chasing me. And now they were trying to catch up. The greatest surprise in this entire journey wasn't how much I had accomplished. It was how complete I felt without needing anyone to witness it. There was a time I thought healing meant proving something. Proving I could win. Proving I could glow up and show out. Proving he had lost something irreplaceable. But that mindset still made him the center of the story. And that wasn't healing. That was still orbiting around someone else's gravity. True healing came quietly. It showed up in the mornings I woke up and didn't think of him. In the nights I poured a glass of wine and celebrated a new client, alone, without the ache of wishing I had someone beside me to share it with. It came in the laughter that didn't need to be photographed, the victories that didn't need to be announced, and the peace that didn't need to be explained. I realized then, my power had never been about getting over him. It was about returning to me. The version of Olivia I had buried under compromise, silence, and constant overgiving. She was rising. She didn't come back loud or angry. She came back focused. Clear. Unapologetic. When I looked in the mirror, I saw eyes that didn't beg for understanding anymore. I saw skin that glowed not from expensive skincare, but from self-trust. I saw a woman who finally knew how to take up space, emotionally, financially, even spiritually. And strangely enough, that's when people began to gravitate toward me. Not just for work, but in life. Friends who had once overlooked me suddenly wanted advice. Men who once dismissed me now slid into DMs with, "Hey, stranger." Even my parents, who once worried I'd been too emotional for my own good, started asking how I did it. And I told them the truth. It wasn't a plan. It was a decision. I decided to stop giving people discounts on my energy. I decided to stop performing worthiness for people who were never going to applaud. I decided to stop shrinking. And the moment I did, everything shifted. Ethan didn't matter anymore. Not because he was a bad person, but because he was no longer relevant to the woman I was becoming. He was a character in an old chapter, one I no longer needed to reread to understand the lesson. The real plot twist wasn't him regretting losing me. It was me realizing I was never lost. I had always been here. Underneath the fear. Underneath the noise. Underneath the narrative that said love had to hurt to be real. People often say, "You found yourself." But that's not quite right. I remembered myself. I remembered how creative I was before anyone criticized my dreams. I remembered how powerful I was before anyone called me too much. I remembered how peaceful I could be without external validation. And with that remembering came a new rhythm. Not rushed. Not reactive. Rooted. I still have moments of doubt, of course. I still get lonely sometimes, especially at night when the silence is loud. But now I don't confuse loneliness with lack. I don't see my singleness as a symptom of failure. I see it as space, for alignment, for joy, for growth. So if you've ever been told that your heartbreak is your defining moment, I'm here to say this. It's not. Your defining moment is when you stop looking backward and start building forward. When you understand that chasing someone who doesn't see your light is like running after the wind, exhausting and pointless. When you finally realize you were never chasing him. You were always chasing the version of you that he distracted you from. And when you catch her, hold her, protect her, let her lead. Because she doesn't need closure. She doesn't need revenge. She doesn't even need applause. She just needs your permission. It's funny how the world talks. Loud when it doesn't know the full story. Quiet when the truth hums through your success. A year ago, I was the girl crying in her car after work. Now, I'm the woman signing deals in corner offices I built brick by brick. The same ones who pitied me now repost my quotes like scripture.
They still don't see the shift.
But I do. They thought I was chasing him. And in a way, maybe I was for a moment. Not him as a person, but what I thought he represented. Validation. Completion.
Security.
But what I found was something far more sacred. Myself. The girl who once rearranged her worth to fit into someone else's narrative. She doesn't live here anymore. Now I water my own garden. I build, not beg. I love, but I never lose myself in the process. And if anyone still wonders, no, I wasn't chasing him. I was catching up to the woman I was always meant to be. And, believe me, she was worth the wait.